Putin's whirlwind tour also included a stop in Cairo. There he advanced a multi-billion-dollar nuclear energy deal. The trip highlights Russia's relationship with its allies in Egypt, Turkey, and Syria. Anton Fedyashin is a professor of Russian history at American University. He's joining us now with analysis. Welcome. Always great to see you.
Good to be here.
The U.S. president taking a step back. It seems as though Putin is delighting in taking a step forward. And this Mideast tour kind of illustrating a new relationship in that area. Talk to me about that and his global clout as 2017 comes to an end.
Well, I think there were three signals sent today. One was to the Russian public. Putin just announced that he will be officially running for president, which was no surprise, but at least we know officially. So part of this is him showing his clout to the Russian population, which is sure to vote for him because there are no competitors. Number two, it was a signal to the West that Russia has not been bogged down in Syria. Moreover, that it has emerged as probably the most important player in the Middle East, at least for now. Number three, of course, this is a signal to Bashar al-Assad that his power will not rest on the Russian army and that he needs to move along with political negotiations because the Russians are not willing to commit thousands of men indefinitely to propping him up. So signals across the board, but a victory lap also because Russia made the difference, maintain him in power, and now it's up to the political settlement, and Putin's already negotiating with the most important players in the region. Yeah,
you mentioned victory lap. I was going to talk to you about that. And also bogged down because there were so many people that predicted Russia is taking a step forward. They're going to end up in a quagmire. The U.S. did this. They went into Iraq and Afghanistan. You just get mired there. This is a different ending to the story. How come?
Very much so. So several reasons. First of all, Putin came of age and became politically conscious during the era of Afghanistan, and that horrible lesson was not lost on him. Number two, there are plenty of examples of Western coalitions going into the Middle East and toppling governments and then having nothing to replace them with, which is the story of Afghanistan to a certain extent, but even more so of Iraq, even more so of Libya. And the Russians learned that lesson by proxy. Number three, however, and I think most importantly, the Russians have been exceptionally patient, methodical in the way that they approach the conflict in Syria, and they have gone out of their way to treat the other players in the region with immense respect, not alienating them, not putting down conditions that they knew they could not meet. Even Saudi Arabia, which has traditionally not been an ally or even a partner of Russia, has been very forthcoming in dealing with the Russians, in striking deals with them. And so this is what patient diplomacy and respect gets you. Now we see if this will be enough to put Syria back together because it's a very complicated situation.
You talked about this dynamic and their approach. Contrast that with U.S. President Donald Trump, who knew when he said, made the statement about Jerusalem that that would probably ignite tensions in the region and perhaps see a step back from some of the allies in the Middle East. Talk to me about how both of these leaders are affecting that region. And of course, Putin, we should mention, saying that peace talks should get started. And he also said that that move was destabilizing for the region.
Absolutely. I think the policy of the White House currently is helping the Russians along. But there is a backstory to this, which is even more important, I would say. Donald Trump is a symptom of something that's been happening with American foreign policy over the past 2 decades, more or less. The Russians have decided to take a different track. They are a Eurasian power. This is their neighborhood, and they can't afford to make sudden moves that provoke very powerful responses, positive or negative. So they have been very methodical in the way that they approach the Middle East. This has so far paid off, and that's the real difference here. The Obama administration, with its policy towards Libya, also did not achieve any of the ends that it set out to achieve. So there's a bigger story going on here, which is that new players are emerging to determine the fate of different regions. Conflicts are being regionalized, which is what the Russians have been doing, talking to the Turks, the Saudis, the Iranians, and sort of sidelining the Americans. And so far it's worked in terms of tactics, but we'll see if it works in terms of a strategy.
What's your sense on that?
I think it will produce better results than the past 15 years of Western involvement, especially through war, with very little thought for the consequences. What the Russians have done is they've learned the bitter lesson about the Middle East, which is that secular dictators are a better alternative, bad as they are a better alternative to fundamentalist-fueled chaos, which follows on precipitous regime change, which creates a vacuum and then sucks in fundamentalists and extremists.
Anton, thanks so much for your observations.
Thank
Always
you
a
for
pleasure.
having me.